Hey, everybody. Welcome to the third episode of Deploy Friday, the podcast or webcast where we encourage you to deploy your applications into the cloud on Friday because it's without doubt the best day to do so. Today, we have an exciting episode where we're going to talk about launching Java applications into the cloud. And we've got special guests today. Let me introduce them quickly. We've got Ivar Grimstad, who's with the Eclipse Foundation. We've got Elder Moraies, who's with Redhat, and Rudy Busscher, who's at Paerra. And of course, we have my colleague, Otavio Santana from Brazil, who is our DevRel evangelist for Java at Platform.sh. I am Robert Douglas, and I am here to shut up and listen because I don't know anything about Java. But I'm going to hand it over to Otavio, and we're going to kick it off with some hard-hitting questions about the cloud. Take it.
Oh, hello everybody. That's amazing to be here with a lot of amazing guys in Java. Mostly, let's start. Okay, talk about cloud, right? So let's start with the most tough question about cloud. That's right now. What is cloud native, and what does mean cloud native to you? Okay, Ivar, let's start.
Okay, so you're pointing at me first. That's good. To me, cloud native is applications that are built with the purpose of running in the cloud. So you can always build an application that is built to run on a server you have under your desk, and then you can move it to cloud. But that doesn't necessarily make it cloud native. But if you're making a cloud native app, you make it with the purpose of running it in the cloud. So you use kind of the interact with the cloud service and use all the kind of stuff you would do to when running in the cloud and take advantage of that environment. Because if you put an application in the container, I mean, it's you can run anything anywhere, and whether it's in cloud or under a desktop, that doesn't matter. But if you're doing a cloud native, you're building it into the cloud for the cloud, and you're using the advantages you can get from running in the cloud.
Nice, nice. Who else? Elder, Rudy.
Well, I like to use the CNCF from CNCF as a principle, not as the definition per se, but the principle, especially when they said that whatever you use to build a cloud native application, this application should be at least loose coupled, resilient, manageable, and observable. So whatever you build, whatever you use to have an application that is loose coupled. So by using loose couple, you mean that this application has APIs itself or with the outside world. And this application will be also resilient, manageable, and observable. So that's what I consider, from my point of view, a good path to a cloud native application.
Rudy, that's your turn.
Okay, I agree with both of those definitions, but I want to add some aspects around cloud native and that's more about the continuous integration, continuous development, and the DevOps style of working. And almost every cloud provider has the command line interface to set up environments, to deploy your application, etc. So the whole concept of having something entirely scriptable from beginning to the end, from your single commit into a Git repository until the deployment into your cloud environment with or without containers or whatever, it is live, then that's for me also something about cloud native, because again, you use something specific from your cloud environment, in this case, the scriptability of the environment.
Well, that's amazing. To be honest, on my side, It's still hard to me understand what cloud native is right now, because I read over 7 books, over 20 articles about cloud native, and everybody has your own definition. Even the cloud native computing foundation, it's hard to say, okay, each what is cloud native right now. What I have as definition is, okay, the set of good practice to you move your application to cloud in the best approach as possible through containers, orchestration, and automation for sure. But yes, that's is hard to, or at least on my aspect, to define cloud native. But anyway, let's move on to the next question that I have in mind. So I guess we're gonna have time to raise more questions. And do you think Java is ready right now to cloud native? Guys?
That's a hard follow-up question to you undermining the definition of cloud native to begin with. If it's an undefined thing, how can anything be ready for it, right?
Yes, that's the huge question.
I think the one of the major things that make Java a very good runtime for cloud native is the JLink capability. So you can create your own JVM at the size that you need. So you don't have to build your the entire JVM into a system. So you can just use the parts that you need.
Okay, this is where I jump in and say, what's JLink?
That is the tooling that comes with the JDK. So it makes you the possibility to pick and choose the modules of the Java platform or your own modules and build your own JVM to run.
So instead of like coming into production with a monolithic Tomcat that's got everything for everybody in it, and therefore all of that overhead, you build it to be very specific to exactly what you want to deploy. Is that right?
Yeah, you can do that with the JVM, the runtime itself, to pick and choose the modules you need to for your application. So you can tailor your runtime for your application and not use a one size fits all.
So Java has this reputation, I'll say a huge reputation of being huge and overbloated. So this big problem that it's got, how small can you make a Java container these days with JLink?
I'll defer that question to somebody else, but I guess
how lightweight?
Pretty small.
Maybe Rudy, you would know that from your work at Paerra, for example.
Yeah. Well, we are not explicitly working on making things as small as possible, but there are situations with JLink that you can create a container which is only, let's say, a few hundred kilobytes in size. So you can make them very small, probably not with all those web application, REST applications, because then you need, of course, more than just the bare minimum. But yes, you can make them really small these days.
I saw some real world examples in customers where the container without JLink had kind of 300, 400 megabytes. And by moving to JLink, they downsized it to 40 megabytes, 30, 50. So it's really a game change for cloud world, because for you to escalate a container with 500 megabytes, it's a lose game, but with that gain of size, if you get that gain of memory, of resource consumption, it's really changed the game.
Another game changer that hasn't been around is also GraalVM. So you can compile your Java bytecode to native code and run it as a native application. And that.
But wait! Doesn't that break the? Doesn't that break the underlying portability concept of Java, or are you saying that that's no longer so relevant if you're deploying always into a targeting operating system that you build yourself, basically specially for that container, then maybe it doesn't need to be portable? Or how do I understand that?
So Java is a multi-purpose, write once, run everywhere runtime, and so you can create your application and run it in Windows or Linux or whatever. But with GraalVM and compiling it to a native, you lose that, exactly what you're saying. But then again, when you put it into a container, you have full control of the runtime environment. So you build your container with your distribution that you want to use, and then you can run a native image, because you don't need that portability across containers anymore. You kind of move the containers around rather than the contents of the container.
So what is this tool that you're saying? Can you spell it out for me?
GraalVM.
GraalVM, G-R-A-L?
The Holy Grail.
Oh, Grail, G-R-A-I-L.
Yeah.
VM.
Yeah.
And how many people use that? Just out of curiosity, is that really highly adopted?
Elder, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. Well, GraalVM, the first really version, public version, commercial version, came less than a year ago. But it's a very long project since Sun Labs time. So when Oracle bought Sun, it came together with Sun, a thing called Sun Labs that turned to Oracle Labs. And there were a project already running that is, there was the Graal compiler, and Graal compiler, it's another version of the JIT compiler that we have already on the JVM, and it grows to a whole new JVM where one of the features is to possibility to create native image for Java applications. And I liked what Ivar said, because people used to say that Java is not good, for example, for serverless, because for servers you really need a fast startup for applications, and with native images you almost don't have these startups time anymore. So you can have really fast bootstrap for applications. So there are a lot of ways that you can get advantages. Of course, it's not a silver bullet. Nothing exists silver bullet, but has really useful uses.
And
I guess.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Rudy.
Yeah, but GraalVM is not the only solution that we have today to make something to start up faster. Let's think about, for instance, the class data sharing, which is now available within JDKs, and even in OpenJ9, you have the JVM version of the Eclipse Foundation also. You can prepare your startup of your JVM by it's more or less also a pre-compilation. So you prepare your classes, your Java classes in a native format, and you can store them so that it's just a memory dump, basically, that you start up. And it can also benefit for your sizes of your containers, because those class data share files can be shared between containers. So you can put them out there once, and every container which is using the same classes, and the JVM classes are always used, of course, you can reuse those things so that you also have faster startup and lower memory consumption. So you don't need GraalVM because it has also drawbacks. It's not only fast startup, but there are drawbacks. There are also other ways of achieving the same thing.
What are those drawbacks?
Native compilation is slow. So if you compile your Java program to the native one, that's a slow process. It can take up to a few minutes. It will be improved in the future, no doubt about it, but today we have that drawback. And there are various reports that the performance, once it is running, the performance is lower. So the Java runtime is so optimized that it can, if it runs for several minutes, it can be so very optimized for your case, your data, that it runs faster than your native compiled code.
I guess the whole point here, when you talk about Java, the startup is good, yes, amazing. However, startup is not enough to the whole application, right? You need to run the application to make faster and faster and faster. And we can make that easily if you are using Java with the just-in-time compiler. That's so amazing. I heard some guys who tried GraalVM because the startup is amazing. That's true. However, they returned to the JVM because after some time, the JVM is much faster than the native code. Right now, what I know right now at this moment, the best use case to the GraalVM is basically to serverless code because you don't need just-in-time compiler, don't need garbage collector, this kind of thing. Mostly because when you talk about Java, we are talking about 25 years of history of garbage collector, a lot of stuff. That's a huge maturity behind the JVM right now. Okay. So let's move on to the next question. So you talk about Java specification, right? And you talk about cloud native, and usually you think about the cloud native specification, right? That is right now Jakarta E. So Ivar, you're gonna be the first. Could you talk about first what is Jakarta E to everybody? Why Jakarta is important to everybody? And also, what do you think about the future of Jakarta E in these cloud native lands?
Yeah, so Jakarta is it's the initiative at the Eclipse Foundation where Oracle donated Java E to Eclipse Foundation a couple of years ago, and Jakarta E is the new name of Java EE. That's kind of probably the simplest way of saying it. So it's a set of specifications, and all of these specifications has tests associated with them. And there were also a lot of implementations that prove that these specifications are implementable and pass the tests. But that's kind of one thing. It's a lot of specifications, and currently it's what was used to be known as Java EE. That is now Jakarta EE. But it's a vendor neutral working group, so that there's a couple of companies involved, a lot of companies actually, and they're collaborating on bringing these specifications forward. And if you're talking about the future of Jakarta EE, currently we have released Jakarta EE 8. We are in the process of getting Jakarta EE 9 out. And as soon as that is done, we will start looking forward. And the main thing with Jakarta EE 9 is that we're changing the namespace. So this is kind of a special release because we are doing something we have sort of promised that we never should do, and that is we are breaking backwards compatibility, because we are changing the namespace from JavaX to Jakarta. And that will be a big shift because after that we are kind of off the hook from the old Java X namespaces and can look forward and explore these in the future. So as soon as this big bang approach of just doing this shift from Java X, the old, to Jakarta, the new, then we're good to go, and then we can start looking at the cloud native technologies.
What are some of the ramifications of this namespace change that's coming? Because that sounds extraordinarily drastic to me.
Yeah, it is drastic, and it was discussed at length. Should we do it partially and just ease it in, or should we do it like a cut and let's handle it?
Isn't that like asking, hey, do you want me to break your leg a little bit at a time?
Yes, sort of. So we didn't want people to have this, or consumers of the technologies to have this pain over and over again. So it's like ripping the Band-Aid off, and then we're good to go.
I mean, just anecdotally to the aspect of not breaking backwards compatibility, this is so amazing in the Java world. My claim to knowing anything about Java is that it's the first language that I learned as a programmer, and in around 2000 or 2001, I became a Sun certified Java developer, which led to my first job. And the application that I wrote at that time was a swing implementation of Battleship, where you place your ships and then a computer algorithm kicks your butt because, well, it's a computer algorithm. And it was really great with all these little graphics that I drew pixel by pixel in something like Microsoft Paint. It looked horrible. That thing still runs on my brand new MacBook Pro with the Java that comes packed with the operating system. There's one bug that's materialized over the years, but talk about backwards compatibility. I packed that jar in 2000, 2001. I can still double click it and play Battleship on modern Java. So hats off. I just hope I don't have any of those namespaces in that little thing.
No, and that is, you can say in the Java E, Jakarta E analogy, you would have to recompile your application now. But we have some tooling to help this. So there is a project at Eclipse Foundation called the Transformer. And that will take your application.
Is there more than meets the eye?
It will transform your application to the new namespace by fixing the bytecode, so you don't have to recompile it. So there are tools being worked on by multiple vendors to ease this migration from JavaX to Jakarta.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
Rudy. The requirement of that namespace change, that's something that we cannot avoid. So we indeed try to make it as smooth as possible for everyone, so that even if it's a requirement, that you still can run your old applications. Like you said, that 20 years old the Battleship application, your old web application will still be deployable on those Jakarta EE9 service without any change. So because it is a very important thing that the backwards compatibility of at that time Java EE, now Jakarta E. So that's a reason why we want to keep that and have started that Transformer project together with all the other vendors.
Yeah, so the difference here from previous version is that on the spec level, we don't say that it has to be compatible. That is kind of a vendor decision. So Paerra, which Rudy represents, take the decision that we want to support this backwards compatibility, and all of the other vendors will probably do the same as well.
Ivar, I have a good question from a friend of mine, Larry. And could you explain a little bit more about the break compatibility means to the Java in Jakarta E right now?
So do you mean with the namespace change?
Yes, I mean, what does mean the namespace to unknown Java developers?
Okay, so if you're a Java E or Jakarta E developer today, and you create applications using this technology, you're used to having the API as your dependency, and you're used to program towards this API, like the JavaX servlet. It's a package name that you have in your code. So when we do this change, it won't be JavaX servlet anymore. It will be Jakarta servlet. And so if you have your application and you're maintaining it on a daily basis, the only thing you have to do is go into your IDE and organize imports, and it will be taken care of for you. But if you have an application that you're not in control over, that are using the old JavaX namespace, then the tooling that Rudy mentioned will come into play, and you will still be able to run your applications in your runtimes.
And it is more than just the Java package name, it's also the XML namespaces, which will change. That's also a thing which will be covered automatically.
Wow, that's great because let me see if you understood. So basically, as Java E developer, I had a version like 5 years ago, the Java 8, right? And then it's become Jakarta, and the newest version gonna break everything. Uh, for There's an open question, but I'd like to ask to you, Elder, like represent the whole community here, is on you, Elder, right now. Do you think that the Java developer want to wait so much time to get a new release? I mean, 5 years to a new release of Jakarta E. What do you think that as a community guy?
Jakarta E came in on 2018. That's right. Yeah, so it's not
Yes.
5 years. It's yeah.
No, the point is Java E, right? The latest version was Java E 8, right? And then it's
Yes.
become Jakarta E, if
Yeah.
without any change. And right now, plus next month, I guess you're gonna have no chance plus break compatibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I
So
got it.
it's kind of 6 years of no future plus break
Mm-hmm.
compatibility. What do you think about that?
Well, it's a tough question because I'm the both sides. I'm a user and also I'm from the community and I'm involved with Jakarta in some way. Uh, but from my point of view, I never saw the, and I'll talk with carefully about it, but I never saw the big companies, the enterprise projects evolving so much fast as in the point that this cycle would be a problem. So I saw it's not unusual customers using Java E6, Java E7. I have a friend who his company is using J2E. It's tragic, but it happens. So I'm not saying that's not a problem. Yes, it would be better if we would have some way to evolve faster. But by now, I never saw the whole marketing waiting. Oh, we are here with a lot of stuff that we could be doing if just Java E or Jakarta E would evolve faster.
So if there are all these older versions of applications floating around in this huge plethora of runtimes and variants, what does that mean for cloud adoption? Does that make it harder for organizations running on those older versions to lift and shift or to adopt cloud native philosophies?
Yes, of course it's harder, especially because some companies is still using Java 8, for example, and you are not getting all the benefits that we have on Java 9, 11, and 13. So for the whole ecosystem, yes, it's harder if you are left to be a lot of behind the versions. It's always more useful if you are using the last versions.
But as I understand it from Otavio, when he started at Platform.sh, he said everybody's using Java 8. Is that still true?
No, not everybody. I don't know the numbers, but I saw the last surveys I saw that are a lot of people already moving to 11, but yes, there are still many people using 8.
I guess Ivar has one survey from Eclipse Foundation, right, Ivar? That was about 75% that's you using Java 8. I'm not sure.
But that was probably the last year's developer survey. But and that reminds me, I want to encourage you to take the Jakarta E developer survey. It's out there. It's out there for, I think it's until the 30th of April. So you have 1 week. So go in there, take the survey. If you don't know where you find the survey, then navigate to jakarta.ee.
Somebody can put the
Jakarta.
link in the comments if they find it.
Yeah.
Then people watching this video will get that link at this moment in the broadcast later. It's pretty cool.
Excellent. So go in there and take the survey.
And I want to make another comment about that 5 years period that apparently nothing happened. That's not entirely true. Maybe the Java EE and Jakarta EE didn't evolve as fast as maybe it could be, but as also explained, enterprises are not that moving fast forward. So 2 comments about that. Java EE8 has a lot of things. If you ask me, it has so many things, it's so complete that maybe there isn't a need to have a new version every year. That's one thing. Second thing is there are a few things which are not optimal for running in the cloud. But yeah, you have also that micro profile initiative, which maybe was coming up in one of the other questions, but they have defined a lot of specifications, useful frameworks to be so that your application can be running smoothly in that distributed environment, which is the cloud environment. So it is maybe not going fast, but it is not that there is a complete standstill for the last 5 years.
Ivar, that's your time. I'm gonna regret to say probably the next one gonna be harder than this one. So
Harder? Come on, man.
do you want to say
Was that a
something, Ivar?
question or?
About the 5 years freezing? No, exactly. Newest thing to the Java E developers. What do you think about that? Because you have 2 hats right now, right? Have the community side, and in previously you had like the consultants hat. So what do you think about this?
Well, I think the transition from Java EE to Jakarta EE took a lot longer than we anticipated and that we wanted. It took a year almost just to get the legal stuff there, and we've been discussing so much other things than technology that we're kind of happy now that we can focus on the technical things. So that has taken a lot of time and a lot of energy, and a lot of people have put a lot of effort into getting. So now we're in a safe environment. We have total control over the trademarks, the licensing, the payment models, and everything is open source. And we also spend a lot of time figuring out how are we going to do this namespace thingy. So now we got that done, and I must be honest, I think this delay in development has hurt the technology. It has, because we have lost momentum, but I'm pretty confident that we will pick it up now that we get started and can really focus forward and not be hurdled by this legal things that are holding us back. So I'm positive. I think.
How much of it was legal and how much of it was technological, if I can ask?
I don't know, but I would say up until we started discussing namespace, which is actually a legal cause to why we have to discuss it, but up until we discussed that, it was probably 95% legal stuff, and then the rest was technical. But so
wait, 95% legal and only 5% technical.
Yeah, probably. And but I think, as Elder I think pointed out earlier, is that most enterprise developers are and the customers, their employers are using like proven technologies, and they're not moving that fast forward. So they're probably happy being on Java EE 6 or 7 or 8, and they haven't really requested anything new yet. So I don't think waiting these years will hurt us that much, because if we do a good job with this tooling and transforming, and like Rudy says, we can run the Java X applications in the Jakarta server. So you can take your Java EE applications and move them to a Jakarta E9 server, and then you can start following the releases from there.
And these legal problems, how much of that was simply because of the sale of Java to Oracle? Is that the main source of the friction?
It has been, the main part is that Oracle owns and has the trademark to the Java name, and they are obliged, they have to protect this. Otherwise they could just give up the trademark, and that wouldn't be very smart of them. So they are done what they have to do, and the main reason is to get rid of the references to Java and the protected trademarks that Oracle has to protect, so we can move freely and not be held back by that. So
by protection, you mean they need to make sure that they don't mix up with independent open source efforts too much. So that you can run free and you don't step on their turf, yeah. Namespace wise. Wow. Okay, if the next question's even harder, I can hardly wait.
Guys, I understood your point. I agree with you guys. A lot of people see the old Java version, but there's a new project coming, right? A lot of new project was born right now, and that's hard to, 5 years without any change. As the Java developer, why should I stay with Jakarta E if I can use Spring, for example? I mean, they are doing a great job in the last 5 years. They have put a lot of stuff there. Why should I use Spring instead? If I don't think about another language, right? So if I like just keep in Java, I have a Spring. So why should I choose Jakarta E instead of Spring?
So it's only for new project, if you mean a new company which starts new in Java, because otherwise you always have your history. I cannot imagine that a company who has done for the past 10 years Java EE application just decides overnight, oh, from now on we're going to rewrite everything with Spring. There is nothing wrong with creating application with Spring or Spring Boot. That's not my point. The point is the developers are so used of developing in Java EE, are so used with all the idioms or all the best practices that you do not change overnight from one thing to another, even if it's still Java. So if you say, why should someone completely new, which has no history, then that is just a matter of taste. Just as it is, why should you use Java and not use .NET, for instance, or C++? That's the same questions as why should you use Jakarta or Spring?
Are they that equal that it's really just like I could flip a coin and I'm going to do just as well with either one?
Yes, for me, based on functionality and the features and the possibility that you have within each language, I don't think that there is a major difference. Probably there are a few things which are easier to do in one language or in what framework than in another one. But again, all those general purpose languages, general purpose frameworks, they are for the general purpose. You can do everything with them.
And who's winning in the market, like Mindshare developer-wise?
Well, what I see is that it depends on the country, and depending on the country, it's also the educational system. So in a lot of countries, you get in the schools and university, you get only people trained in one of those frameworks, and then of course they go to the companies, and so that means that companies sometimes don't have an option to choose something else, because they can have only developers which are trained in one of those things. So it is more
That's
than...
interesting. Do you have examples, like specific countries, like, you know, like Belgium's a Spring and Holland is a Jakarta EE, and like you meet at the border and fight?
Well, I think Belgium indeed is a Spring one. Germany is more Jakarta and Java EE wise. Also, South America is more Jakarta and Java EE wise thing. So there are many, yeah, I would even say cultural differences. So it's, and that doesn't mean that there are no differences between their thing and that there is no one better than the other one. It's not always based on that criteria that companies and people choose what they want to develop.
It's funny, that fast evolving discussion, because for many, many years, people complained that Java take too long to the new version. And now that we have new versions on 6 months, people are complaining that they are left behind. Oh, I don't even know what's going on
Speed
Java
up.
9.
No, slow down.
Yeah, slow down, come on. So people are always complaining about something.
Yeah. Ivar shows up.
So the question was,
Okay, sorry.
Why Jakarta EE and not, for instance, Spring? That's
yeah, but I agree with everything that Rudy says. It depends on your developers. And if you are a Spring shop and used to develop Spring, then Spring and Spring Boot is the obvious choice. It's a good technology. It's a good framework. If you're in coming from Java EE world, you're probably better off sticking to that. And they're so similar, so it's not that hard to switch. But it's more of, yeah, what you're used to and what your developers are more comfortable to be productive with. And if I should start a new project today, I mean, I obviously would choose Jakarta EE, but somebody else would pick something else. And
Why you're wearing the shirt?
Especially now when we have this namespace change, we're coming back to this all the time. Then writing new applications with the Jakarta namespace. I mean, the first runtimes that will support the Jakarta namespace are the Jakarta application servers. So the products coming from the vendors in the Jakarta community will be first out.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I've got a really burning question. But first, I want to jump over to Edwin from the comment thread from the audience, who points out that the release gap might not have affected enterprise users, but certainly it affected new adopters and startups who tend to jump to the shiniest toy and whatever's being talked about at conferences or in blogs. And that the releases and innovations of any stack or technology are what get people excited, what, you know, generates hype. And he says that we haven't really gotten any of these innovations and hype messages for a long time now with Java EE or Jakarta EE. So here's my burning question, okay? I'm coming back to my Java roots, and I'm gonna choose my framework, and I'm about to be hyped by either Spring or something else or Jakarta EE, forgetting about namespaces and legal challenges, because that's not gonna do it for me. That's not gonna, you know, like I'm gonna run the other way if I hear that stuff. What are you gonna tell me about Jakarta EE right now that's gonna make me start developing it with it? What should I be hyped about?
So I would say, if you want something that is future-proof and you want to be productive right away, I'd say you have to write less code, less configuration, less boilerplate to get up and running with a decent application using Jakarta EE than any other framework.
So it's developer experience and hiding complexity?
Yes.
I like a definition that I heard from Adam Bean, I think last year. He said, I use Jakarta EE because it's boring, because it just works.
But wait. Hold on. You're trying to hype me here. If I hear the word boring, I'm going to fall asleep.
Yeah, it just works, man. Come on, you are doing and stuff works, so it's boring.
I'm a young developer right out of college. I want something exciting.
Yeah.
What's exciting about Jakarta EE?
If you just
that
keep
it's boring?
repeating boring long enough, it will be a new hype.
Yeah.
Let's try that.
Yeah, and it can maybe boring, and in that sense, in the thing that it works, and you can read all about how you should do it, so you don't need to. You're not so triggered anymore that you need to think about what should I do. So it is maybe not that indeed attractive because you don't need to find out who it works. But from the company's point of view, that is of course a good thing that it is fast and easy to use.
So it's a choice that reduces risk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nobody gets fired for choosing Jakarta EE.
I hope not.
It's mature, it's reliable, it works.
Okay. Boring is the new black.
Yeah.
Got it. Interesting. I would have totally renamed this podcast, by the way, if I had known you were going to say that. I would have been like, come and find out why Jakarta EE is so boring. And that would have gotten a lot of people hyped.
You can hear this podcast that I record with Adam B. It's called The Boring Enterprise Java or something. You can hear it.
Okay, good. Otavio,
That's
next
good.
question.
Oh yeah. Okay, you talk about buzzwords, right? And I guess the microservice is the new black. Everybody, every kind of language talk about microservice, right? So what do you think about Jakarta E and microservice?
Yeah, if I should start with them, I think Jakarta is perfectly well suited for microservices, especially if you combine it with the microprofile APIs. And most of the Jakarta runtimes support both these APIs. And Paerra Micro is an example of that. It's a small, fast runtime that supports both these and is excellent for creating microservices.
And in the comments to this video, we have links off to Platform.sh where you can launch that with one click.
Yeah, and I would like also to make the comment, okay, microservice, it is hype, so that means, do we really need it? So probably about 90% of the use cases where people use microservices today are not very useful. They should use better something else than the pure microservice way of working. So there are, of course, good things with the microservice architecture. That's not what I want to say. That in some scenarios, it is the perfect fit for your problem. But everyone wants to do it, although it's maybe not the best solution for your problem. So Jakarta EE in that sense can be used as a precursor. What we always say to our customer is that you should try it out, see how it works, and then if it evolves, if you need that scalability, if you need that independence in the independent services, then you can try to switch to a more microservice-oriented architecture step by step. But it's not that you cannot use it. As Ivar said, you have also the microprofile specifications which you can combine with Jakarta EE to have that transition, or even the endpoint that can even be also a solution that you just use those two for your microservices and just stop there in your transition.
So what is your litmus test, Rudy, if you're deciding to go with microservices or not? Like, what are the factors you're looking for when you make a recommendation one way or another?
If you start with a new project, it will be never a microservice setup, because you need to have so many things in place for your infrastructure, for your management, for your overview, that it takes too much time to have some simple use cases online. So from the business point of view, you need to be having something which go fast. It's not that you have now an idea and that you can only start, let's say, only have the first product available 6 months later, because then your momentum is maybe gone for your company.
So if I can repeat what I just heard, if you're starting a new project and the momentum of development and launching new features and getting to the point where everything just works, if that's what's important, don't go microservices, go monolithic, because you've got everything in one program. Is that what I heard?
Yes, yes.
So what are the vectors for change that drive you towards microservices? Is it scalability of the application? Is it separation of concerns so that you can divide up your teams? What's the main driver?
Your own success. If your little application is so successful that it's attracting so many requests, then you need to think about change. And that can be very gradual. And that doesn't mean that you need to rewrite it, because you can split up your monolithic if you have started in a proper way. Some people call it the modular monolith. So if you have internally already a good separation of all your domains, then you can easily split it up. You can easily make it to a more microservice type of application.
I guess you should create a deploy Friday to talk about microservice. Why that fails so too much? Because there are several horror history about microservice crash on production.
I have a theory about it. Can I share it?
Go ahead, please.
Because maybe you guys already heard about the Conway's law, where Mr. Conway said that companies that design software, they will deliver software that reflects the way that they are organized. So if you look to the companies that are successful on microservice, usually they didn't start with microservice. They have to implement microservice in order to reflect the way that they are organized. So they have teams with multi-discipline, knowledge inside the same team. So that small team ended up to delivering that kind of software that we call microservice. So usually the projects that fail on microservice, they fail because they think just about the architecture, they think about just the technology and not about the people. So for me, the microservice begins with people and ends with software, and not the opposite.
Oh, so cute, man. I almost crying right now. So, Ivar, would like to say something? I guess that there are 7 minutes left, so I can do more 2 questions, I guess, and then you can end up.
Yeah, go ahead. What's the next question?
Okay, so you mentioned about Jakarta E, right? And that's amazing framework. And we also, under Eclipse Foundation umbrella, we also have Eclipse microprofile. Let's look to take a piece of Jakarta E and kind of, and it has a goal to create a microprofile to Java user right now. So what do you think about the future about both? So the integration between Jakarta E and microprofile.
So the question is what I think currently the situation is that we have the Jakarta working group and we have microprofile projects, and right now the microprofile project has been told that in order to release specifications you need to create the concept of a working group within Eclipse Foundation, so you have better control over the IP, the intellectual property, when you're creating specifications. And that is just to protect the developers and everybody who uses the microprofile. and that is undergoing, and sooner or later the microprofile will form its own working group and be have its own specification process and be kind of equal to Jakarta EE in the Eclipse ecosystem. And that opens for the possibility for how these two specification frameworks shall consume specification from each other. And the discussion has been kind of parked on the Jakarta EE side now to wait until the working group has been established, and then we know what world we are in, and then we can take this discussion and figure out how do we want to do that. On the microprofile working group or projects, they have kind of had this discussion already, and they said that we want to do what they call a pull approach, and that means basically nothing other than that, hey, we're just an open source project and anybody can consume us whatever we want. We don't want to push anything to anybody, which is fine. And it's kind of a decision to sort of, in my personal view, it kind of violates what Microprofile originally set out to do. And that was that they would go out and create specifications and then seek out ways of standardizing it. But no, they're kind of going away from that responsibility and saying, hey, it's up to somebody else if they want to standardize it. But
sorry,
now they're
who is
starting
doing
a
that?
working group and doing this standardization efforts. Yes.
You said they. Who is they? Who is doing that?
Microprofile project, and when they start a new working group, it's kind of a new situation where you have these two equally projects. So on the Jakarta side of the fence, the decision I think that we will have to make there is, are we going to, in the Jakarta platform, consume microprofile specifications as they are, or do we want to consume them by taking over the lifecycle and integrating them into Jakarta that way? And that is a decision that is in the future, so we haven't kind of started on that yet.
But those two groups, and it's mainly the same set of people, but those two frameworks, let me call it that way, they have also different targets.
Yeah.
As Jakarta EE's, as from the enterprise, is about stability. We said it already before. We have 20 years experience, so we have a stable system. Microprofile, geared more towards microservices, is something new. 5 years ago, it was the new thing. So they are much more in the experimental phase, also more in the breaking changes phase. We are trying out things and see if it works or not works. So there will be a synergy between the two, that's for sure. There are a few things which are basically a bit missing within Jakarta EE, like something like a config is a good example of that. So there will be a synergy between the two, but there will always have a different goal. The more stable kind, the stable projects, or the more innovating, trying out things within the cloud.
Great. Well, that wraps up the entire discussion, basically, because what I've heard from start to finish is that stability, backwards compatibility, safety, boringness are the hallmarks of the Java ecosystem these days. And I mean that with praise, because for a lot of people, software development, for a lot of companies, organizations, the very act of software development is basically fraught with risk, littered with failure, broken in every way that you can imagine. So stability and boringness and dependability and no backwards, breaking changes those are really attractive features. So congratulations to you and everybody who are stewarding those initiatives through the industry. Does anybody have any closing comments that you've just been burning to get out there, but we haven't asked the right question for them? Here's your chance. Go.
Okay, I saw one good question from Esteban Lopez.
Oh yeah,
What do you
the Deploy
recommend
Friday.
what do you recommend to make deployments in production during the off the hours on Friday?
Well, maybe I can start with that, Otavio. So the reason we call this the Deploy Friday podcast, it's a little bit ironic because the safe and boring adage and wisdom is that you don't deploy on Friday, because if you do and it goes wrong, then your weekend and probably your colleagues' weekends are going to be destroyed picking up the pieces and fixing things. But at Platform.sh, we practice your deployment every time you make a git push. So for every branch that any developer is working on, every push they make to that branch is practicing the entire deployment. So you might have practiced your deployment 1,000 times by the time you're ready to actually deploy, and you have a lot of confidence it's going to work. That confidence allows you to say, hey, screw it, I'm going to deploy on Friday. Did that answer your question? Yeah. So
Yes.
again, in the comments in the video, there are links to try that with Java and microprofiles and Spring Boot and Jakarta EE and anything else you would ever want to try, Paerra included. I really want to thank Rudy, Ivar, Eldar, and of course Otavio for joining me on this episode. It was I was quite surprised at the directions that the conversation took, but I also learned a lot. So hopefully the audience was surprised and learned a lot too. And to the audience, I'd like to invite you to join me in 2 weeks when I will be discussing the Typo 3 long-term support 10.4 release, which is new and exciting. So join me for Typo 3 discussions. And that is it, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. It's Deploy Friday. Go deploy. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
See you.